Hello everyone and welcome to Organic Matters, the podcast brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. I am here in one of my favourite parts of the world, the Burren in County Clare, very near Fanor, or technically are we in Fanor? I'll find out now from the farmer who's with me, Pat McCarthy. Pat, thank you very much for having me. And exactly, where are we?
You're in Fanor and Hannah, and you're in a valley called Fermoil, and it's usually called the Vale of Fermoil. And we have a lot of winterages up around here and very little grass here, but I have summer grass in Doolin, and I have a 350 acre farm, and most of it is winterage, and then most of my summer grass then is in Doolin.
And I suppose we'll talk a bit as well about the fact you do an agri-tourism element as well, and we'll talk about that. But I suppose to explain to anyone who's not familiar with winterage or the Burren, I mean, the Burren is such a unique part of the world, not even Ireland, but the world, in terms of having this limestone pavement. And so when you say 350 acres, we're not talking about lush grassland in Kildare or something like that.
No.
But you have your own type of golden vale in a way, because, you know, a lot of farmers would be envious of this limestone pavement and winterage area that you have. Because traditionally what you do, now you can set me right, is that the cattle have this lovely dry lie down area in the wintertime, which means you don't necessarily need all the big sheds that a lot of other farmers need.
Well, I usually bring them back from Doolin, or I keep some cattle here on the low grounds as well, and then they go up into the mountains then in October, and then they stay there usually until they calve, or maybe 2 weeks before they calve. I start bringing them down one by one or two by two as long as they're coming on, and so they've been up in the mountains for about 5 months. Like they're there October, November, December, January and February, and then you usually bring them down in March, and then they have their the calves down here then, and then I usually put them back up to a place that I would have preserved for them, that would be half summer grass, half in the winterage, and it's usually very healthy for the calves because it's dry. There's a lot of hazel, so there's a lot of cover. And even though we're in Fanor, which is by the sea, this is about a mile up a valley, so it's fairly sheltered as well. And the hazel helps it to shelter as well. So you get very little scour, very little sickness in the calves if they go out healthy, and they're usually born outside. Although I do bring in them in at night, the cows, and then just check them. And then usually the minute they're born, they're usually put out straight away.
That's fantastic. And people will be wondering what kind of breed of cattle do you have and how many do you have?
Now, I have different people around here of different breeds. A lot of people try to go for big breeds and try and maximise the amount of cattle they have that they can keep. And a lot of people have Shirleys, but I like to have Aberdeen Angus crosses, Shorthorn crosses, and then I cross them with a Limousin bull. And then this last year now I got a Simmental bull from a local farmer, Benny McNamara, and he had purebred Simmentals. And because you're in the Burren, you have to buy animals that are used to the rocks, one thing for walking around, and also they don't get red water, which is
caused by lime,
caused by a tick.
Tick, that's it. Yeah,
that isn't in the Burren. So if you buy an animal from outside, you run the risk of doing that. So what we do is we usually buy our bulls in limestone areas, because if the bull gets sick, he's out for 6 weeks, and then you have late calves and all that. So we try our best then to buy local. Yeah. It's very difficult then, of course, to buy organic local. But we get derogations then for that.
There must be a few more organic farmers in the area, though. You're a relatively recent convert to organic.
They'll be all organic this year. And more people are getting into it, because really before getting into organics, we were organic, because you can't manure the mountains, because you can't get up with tractors or anything like that. And you don't want to go in there and ruin the grass either on it. So really, I was nearly half organic before I even started. So it was only a few acres that I was spreading manure, and then I just managed that from now on.
And how have you found it converting to organic? Was it, like, yes, I know you're saying it wasn't a big switch from fertilizer, but were there any other things that you've kind of been thinking about or found it difficult?
No, it was fairly now what I do is with the meadows, I preserve them earlier, and I don't let cattle into them to try and make the grass grow as long as possible. And even though there was fine weather at the moment, I'm just trying to maximise the amount of grass that I have, so I won't cut until the end of August. So I'll probably get a second growth coming through the grass, but that's all I want is volume, because the only thing, I sell all the calves, so then the only thing I'm feeding silage to or hay to is cows, and they'll eat anything else when they come down off the mountains. They've no problem eating tough grass or that kind of stuff.
I know in England with the sheep they call it hefting. When sheep are kind of bred to the land, they kind of know the land and they know all the roots around it. And I kind of think cattle are like that. Even my cattle at home, the homebred cattle know kind of which paths I want them to go down and stuff. So yours does sound very similar.
And I keep maybe about 6 replacements every year, and they're born here, and so they're used to the. If you bring, sometimes I out of necessity, I might have to buy an animal from outside, and it's like a freak show watching them walk along the rocks.
They're like, what is this?
Yeah, they're kind of looking and they're like nervous and they're saying, where am I going now? But they do get used to it after a while, but you wouldn't, to be honest, I'd keep those cattle off the really rough terrain. I have some winterages that aren't as bad. The thing about winterages, you have to have water on them, because they don't like, cattle can't walk very far on the rocks, so you need a lot of water on it. So if I did buy in any animals, I'd keep them in not the roughest areas and places where there was water, where they wouldn't have to walk.
And it sounds like you have a lot of kind of that history and knowledge of the place. Is this a generational kind of part of the world for you?
It is, yeah. The cottage we're standing beside that I live in is 400 years old.
Wow.
And the children are the 9th generation to live in the house.
Yeah.
The first McCarthy that came here was a hedge school teacher, and he came back in the 1600s, and he married a local girl who was called Glynn, and we have one of the cottages named after her, Glynn's Cottage, and so we get a lot of Americans here, and they like the history and the old houses and the old kind of quirky looking sheds that have been done up into Airbnbs.
Well, that's a nice segue. We'll move on a bit, because I will move on to the agri-tourism bit, so we'll just go up here a bit. So we've come on to some of the cottages, and you mentioned Airbnb. So I guess first and foremost, kind of people are always thinking, or farmers are always thinking, could I do up that old shed, and would it be worthwhile doing Airbnb? But it's all about location, isn't it?
To be honest, we were doing it and doing fairly okay, but when they changed the name of the coast road to the Wild Atlantic Way, then it put us right in the middle of the tourist area, because a lot of people before used to come to Ballyvaughan and kind of take a shortcut up the Corkscrew Hill and go on to Doolin and the Cliffs of Moher, because everybody just wanted to see the Cliffs of Moher. But now they all will stay on the Wild Atlantic Way, and then we're just a mile off the Atlantic Way, and we're halfway between Kerry and Galway. So everybody looks at the map and they say, oh, we'll stay there, because we're coming up from Kerry and we're halfway to Galway or Connemara, and we'll stay in that cottage. Plus the fact, if you're doing up old sheds, don't try and modernise them.
Okay.
Just kind of make them what they are, because people, when they look on the internet, when they're on a holiday, they want to stay in a kind of a quirky looking place.
Somewhere authentic.
Authentic, yeah. And with stone and small doors, small windows. They love that. Now, they might live in it for 2 years, but they'll love it for 2 nights.
Well, I'm laughing now because when you said the famous Corkscrew Hill that anyone will be familiar with who's gone around the Burren, coming up your road, I mean, I'm okay with narrow roads, but I was thinking some of the Americans you get or some of the tourists must think, oh my God, because they're a little bit twisty, I'd say.
They arrive here and it's like as if they've been on a white knuckle roller coaster. And we're lucky enough that there's a pub down the road, I don't know whose pub, that does good food, and it's only about 2 miles from here, but otherwise than that you don't want to be sending them back 10 miles. They said, no, I don't want to get into the car again. So No, but they're you just tell them to drive slowly,
Yeah.
and that's the main thing. But they do anyways.
And what kind of put it in your head? Because you mentioned before you're ninth generation, or your children in the house are the ninth generation. So what put it in your head to start the Airbnb?
Well, I was in England for 10 years, and I was on the building trades, and then I came back, and I loved the sheds, and I wanted to keep them all in the kind of same condition that I grew up with, and my family knew them, and I didn't want to knock any of them and make modern sheds, and they weren't really practical for farming purposes, because they had small doors and small windows, and so I was thinking then that I'd do one. Then I did one, and then I saw it if that did well, and then that did well, and then I built the other one off the profits I made off the first one, and just kept going and going at that stage.
And when did it start? What year was that roughly?
Started maybe 2011.
Wow. Okay.
So I've been building since then. I started building before that, the house that I'm living in. So then I did up an old house that I was born in. So I redid that and then started on the sheds then. But it makes them practical, because you couldn't it wouldn't be practical to do up the roofs and start putting natural slate on these old sheds that you're not going to use. So you have to use them for something. So lucky enough, the tourism was going fairly well in the West Coast, and the Wild Atlantic Way started around the same time. So that was helping me as well.
I guess being an organic farm might be another selling point to that as well, because people like the fact there's no chemicals or anything.
Yeah, then the representative from the Irish Organic Association was out there lately, and he was giving me an inspection, and then he gave me a sign, Organic Farm, and he said, would you mind putting that up? And I said, I'd only love to put it up because people would love that, because they love coming into somewhere that's authentic. Most people love, even though they mightn't eat organic all the time, because it's probably it might be near them or something like that. But they love to feel that they've been visited on an organic farm. They like to feel that they're helping the environment.
Yeah, and I think it's not very intensive either. That there's kind of a natural way of farming.
No, on my farm, I don't try and maximise every acre of ground. You know what I mean? You have to have. I don't want to intense, and I don't want to be feeding concentrates and things like that. So I keep just the amount that the farm is able for.
Yeah, it's a lovely feel about the place, even when you come off. I mean, the Burren and Fenor in general has this lovely feel about it, but just here really feels like a little sanctuary. And like you said before, it being tucked in a valley, it has its own sort of microclimate.
It is lovely, all right, but you were here on a fine day, Hannah, and if you were here in the middle of winter, it mightn't be as nice.
I promise, I've been here on a few different occasions, and I still find it charming.
No, it is still lovely now. It is lovely, and people who come here, they just love walking around and looking at the old houses and that kind of stuff, and they like that stuff is the exact same, because there's pictures of the houses
before
100
and after.
years ago, and they're still the same, or more or less the same.
I'm wondering, because people are always wondering about the money side of it, but in terms of farming and agri-tourism, would you say it's kind of 50-50 in terms of where the money's coming from, or do you think there's a bit more in agri-tourism?
At the moment, I'd say it's 50-50.
Okay.
And now I'm building another Airbnb in Doolin, and that'll probably push it, because Doolin is a real tourist area. You can charge more probably for that, and that'll probably push it over the farming.
And your neighbours with Trump over there as well, pretty much getting close to being neighbourly with him.
I love that guy.
He hasn't done you any harm anyway in terms of putting it on the map. Yeah.
The thing about it is I stay out of politics when it comes to Americans, because you never know who's going to be.
Well, you're very wise. I was going to ask, in terms of, say, the highest percentage of tourists that you get, where are they from?
I'd say about 60% would be Americans.
Okay.
And then I'd say about 20% would be continentals, and then 20% would be Irish.
Okay.
So that's we'd mostly get Americans because they pre-book, and the Irish people kind of book a week in advance, or maybe a day in advance, and if they see that it's free. And whereas the Americans tend to, because they look it up on the internet and they see the old kind of characteristics, they want to come and stay in places like this. And so that's why they pre-book a lot. So they then it's booked out. The Irish kind of come when they feel that they want to get away for a weekend. They'll book. Continentals also are fairly organised too. They'll book in advance.
It's only the Irish who are lastminute.com.
They are, yeah.
I'm wondering, because I bet there's a lot of farmers listening to this who do have builder skills or building skills or a background in it. Is there anything kind of unexpected that was thrown up that you didn't expect? I'm wondering even about electricity or sewage or anything like that.
Now, electricity, I had to redo all the electricity and make it stronger to
Are you still on single phase for everything, or is it 3-phase?
No, I did I upped everything, the amps and everything, because I needed to the houses. But then I looked into the farming aspect of it, and before I started I was saying that I was going to do welding and that, so I needed that kind of electricity supply anyways. So I got that prior to starting all the buildings. Plus the fact then digging up, everything has to go underground now with the electricity. Nothing goes to the gable of a house anymore. So you had to, before you did all the building, you'd want to put down all these things where you think you're going to build. Even if you're not going to build, put them in anyways. Plus the fact that you need electricity for septic tanks and things like that, which makes it more environmental as well.
There's a lot to think about, isn't there?
Yeah, but you kind of there's a lot to think about when you look at the whole place, but when you're doing it one by one, you're kind of thinking, oh, I'll do that one, and I need this, this, and this. But if you were looking at it, you'd say, oh my God, you're building a village. But
you have built a village though, because I came up and there's how many houses there? Feels like there's what, three or four dotted around.
But but when you're doing it one at a time, it's not as hard. Like if you're, let's say, when you see lads doing a housing estate, they have to do a huge amount of groundworks beforehand. Whereas I just say, oh, I'll put a wire there, I'll put sewerage from there. But because they're all spread out and they're higgledy-piggledy, you have to kind of think about the sewerage and how you get it to the septic tanks. Or do you have to do a separate septic tank? These things you have to think about. But and I find with planning as well, they don't really mind if you keep it looking the same. So don't make it modern, don't add on, just build what you have. And the smaller Airbnbs do better than the bigger Airbnbs.
Very interesting.
Yeah. One bedrooms, because they're easy to clean.
Yeah.
And people are just come in couples, whereas if they come in big families, then they need a lot of activities in the area, and we're out in the countryside, so you don't have activities. So that's
very interesting.
Yeah.
If people want to find you, how do they find you before we finish up the podcast?
From oilproperties.ie.
Okay.
And all the properties are on those, and you can book through those websites as well.
Okay. There you go, for any Americans, Continentals or last minute Irish. There you go, from oilproperties.ie.
Or Asians or Australians.
Or whatever, yeah. We're equal opportunities here.
Yeah, no, we keep everybody.
Very good. Okay. Well, thanks very much for that, Pat. And for anyone listening, you've been listening to Season 5 of Organic Matters, the podcast brought to you by the Irish Organic Association. So there are plenty more podcasts that you can go back and listen to in our back catalogue. And for more information on organics, you can go to www.irishorganicassociation.ie. But for me, Hannah Quinn Mulligan, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be back again in another 2 weeks with another podcast.